Greetings, my fellow historians. Welcome to History with Larocco, our weekly podcast about everything history. I am your host today, Muti, and today we will be joined by two very special guests, Johnny and Elvina. Johnny, may you introduce yourself?
So my name is Johnny, and I am from East West International School. I learn in grade 10, and my history role model is Stalin. I take him as a role model because uh, I'm similar to him because we both came from a poor background and we're trying to work our way up so that we can one day become the leader. My goal is if I become a leader, I will make everyone equal, but I will not make the same mistakes as Stalin did. I will make sure that there won't be uh, the equal. People will be equal and it'll be fair, and no one will feel like they are mistreated by other people. And then we will make the. I will continue to make the world a fair place to live in, and everyone will be happy.
Wow, that's very impressive, Johnny. I see you have great aspirations. That's great. So now let's move on to Elvina. She can do her introductions.
Hi, I am Alina, and just like Johnny said, except that my role model is Adolf Hitler. Well, to me, I don't really believe in fascism, but in what I've heard from his history, the sacrifices he takes from a young boy into him, all the steps he makes him really interesting because at some point he's just an artist and something made his mind change and he become a politician instead. Oops. And so for that, I think I really look up to him. I have books about him, and I'm really interested in what he do in life. And now I would love to go to Moody. So Moody, who's your role model?
That's not usually how it works, Alvina. I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but I guess I will be a good host and answer your question. As for me, my role model would have to be, I'd say, Lenin, because of his great speaking abilities. He's a great speaker, a great public per- person. I think I really look up to those who have the ability to connect with such a large group of people. And as for his bravery to start a revolution and lead something new, I also really look up to that. Hashtag Peace Land Bread. So now that the audience knows about our esteemed guests, let's introduce the topic for this week's podcast. Was Poland the most significant reason why the Soviet Union lost control over Eastern Europe? After World War II, the Soviet Union proposed a pact to communist East European countries to form a military alliance. It was called the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was a military alliance formed between communist East European countries with nations including Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. These countries form a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and West Europe, protecting the USSR from invasion. The most important member of the Warsaw Pact, however, must be Poland, because both times the Soviet Union got invaded by the West, it was through Poland. Poland was a country no stranger to being occupied by powerful nations. The first time, in 1939, the Nazis, under the rule of Hitler, invaded, putting Poland under fascist rule. Later, in 1945, the Soviets came in and put Poland again under a different rule, this time communism. And after 35 years of censorship by the Soviet Union, the Polish finally had enough. They wanted a rebellion. They wanted their own voice. This led to the Solidarity movement in 1980. So guys, Johnny, Alvina, I would like to ask you, to what extent did Solidarity combat communism in Eastern Europe?
Before going into the question, I would like to give a brief information about solidarity, like a cover up. The history of Solidarity is a Polish non-government trade union. It began on August 14, 1980, and it was founded by Lech Walesa and the others. So in its early 1980s, it became the first independent labor union in a Soviet bloc country. It gave a rise to the broad and an anti-communist social movement that at its height claimed some at least 10 million members. It is considered to have contributed greatly to the fall of communism. So, I want to start off with the Poland's communist government that attempted to destroy the union by insulting the martial law in 1981, followed by several of political repression, but the end was forced into negotiation. And followed by August 1989, a solidarity-led government has been formed, and in December 1990, Walesa was elected as president. And this was soon followed by a dismantling of the communist government system and by Poland's transformation into a modern democratic state. Solidarity's early survival represented a break in the hardline stance of the Communist Polish United Worker Party, which is also can be known as the PZPR. And it was also an unprecedented event, not for the People's Republic of Poland. There's also a party that is a one-party communist regime, a satellite that is ruled by the USSR, but for the whole of Eastern Bloc. Solidarity is a huge example that led to the spread of communist ideas, and the movement throughout the Eastern Bloc, which can be weakening communist governments. And this process also later continued in the revolutions of 1989. And meanwhile, Solidarity had been transforming itself from a trade union into a social movement, or more specifically, a revolution movement. And over 500 days following the Gdańsk Agreement, 10 million workers had joined in. And using strikes and protests and other protest actions, Solidarity sought a force to change in government policies. In some cases, as a Biesleco Baila, Solidarity managed to force corrupt officials of the government to lose their jobs. Also, at the same time, it was careful never to use force or violence, so as avoid giving government any excuse to bring security forces into the play. Solidarity members, including around 27 members, on the March 19, went on a 4-hour strike warning on the March 27th, involving around 12 million people paralyzed the country. This was the largest strike in the history of the Eastern Bloc, and it forced the government to promise an investigation into its beatings. So this and Wales's agreements to defer further strikes proved a setback to the movement, as the euphoria that had swept Polish society subsided. Nonetheless, the Polish Communist Party and the PZPR had lost its total control over the society.
So now we're gonna talk about the things that caused the fall of Russia that that isn't solidarity. And the first thing is from the Hungarian uprising, the Prague Spring, and the Berlin Wall. These things made the Soviet Union already look bad enough, and eventually it will probably lead to their fall because the people, they were losing support for their leaders. And also when Gorbachev came into office, he introduced the reforms that he wanted to transform the Soviet Union politically and economically, and these reforms were called the Peres- Perestroika, and these they will, because of this, the first two democratic elections were held in 1989, and also there was the creation of the Congress of People's Party, which is like a democratic party which went against what the Soviet Union believed in. And from this, he had Gorbachev had like opposition from the Liberal and Conservatives Party. There was a coup in 1999 in August that tried to topple Gorbachev, and also Andrei Sakharov, which is like a noble person, he criticized the pace of the reforms, saying that it was too fast and it was pushing the people. They were too in a hurry. Also, from these reforms, Gorbachev failed to control what he had released, which are like the bad things. People were getting too much freedom, and they weren't happy about, and they were happy. So this just caused issues. Also, from the after Khrushchev, the Politburo they got more soft because after that they started getting expensive cars from Germany. They started getting eating expensive food, using Italian silk sheets, and this made the younger generations lose hope in the leaders because uh, they thought that they thought that these leaders were not following the communist ways, and they were losing interest in these ideologies. So the younger generations were not willing to step forward and protect their country. So then, the so this made the younger generations lose support, and sooner or later, this would cause to the fall of the Soviet Union, and from this, Gorbachev slowly lost the people's support, and they were their their country was slowly crumbling to pieces, and the solidarity was just another factor that played a small part in this. It was not all solidarity's fault.
Mm, that was interesting. But don't you think that solidarity is not the only reason why Poland was a factor in destroying the communism in Eastern Europe? I think personally that the support that Poland had from significant people in the world, um, nations, the United Nations, and the support they had in general was definitely, to me, a factor in why Poland was able to combat communism and was a factor in combating communism in Eastern Europe as a whole. So I would like to ask you guys, how significant was the support from the support in general of Poland moving away from communism, being an enemy and a factor that destroyed communism in Eastern Europe. Since Elvina went first last time, Johnny, you can go first this time. Take the mic, Johnny. It's all yours.
Okay, so now we're on the topic of international support, and we can see that Ronald Reagan he didn't help that much because he was when he got elected into office, he he put all his focus into the American military, and he also was rushing to get better weapons and also better resources. Um, and Ronald Reagan, he technically didn't help Poland because he instead he isolated the Soviet from the world economy by pushing oil prices to their lowest levels in decades, and from this we can see that the Soviets they were really dependent on their oil to sell. So if the oil prices at go down like drastically, then uh, Soviets their economy will have to slowly crumble, and also uh, we can we know from some secret documents hidden in the home of Poland's last communist era house. It indicated that there was that like Walesa, he was an informant for the communist secret services, which is trying to say that Walesa allegedly was collaborating with the secret police, and the proof from this is there was a note found in the documents that strongly suggests that this is real and authentic, and in it the police he writes that he was hiding evidence in order to protect the reputation of the Polish democracy icon. Also, from this, we can see that Walesa was secretly trying to undermine the solidarity, even though he was the one leading it. We're not, and Walesa, he was allegedly an agent for the communist state during this period, in which he was trying to gain his reputation. And we also know that this note was allegedly signed by Walesa, so it proves a bit more authenticity.
So, to follow up by that, I wanted to say that the range of support for the Solidarity was unique. It was wow. So, no other movements in the world was supported by Ronald Reagan and most importantly, Pope John Paul II, and many more peace campaigners, including Santiago Corralo, Enrico Berlinguer, Margaret Thatcher, and Tony Benn. There, well, it also received support from the NATO spokesman, the Christians, the Western communists, the conservatives, the liberal socialists. The international community outside the Iron Curtain condemned Jaworski's action and declared support for Solidarity, which dedicated to organizations were formed for that purpose. You know, kind of like the Polish Solidarity campaign in Great Berlin. But the US President Ronald Reagan imposed economic sanctions on Poland, which eventually would force the Poland government into liberalizing its policies. Meanwhile, the CIA, together with the Catholic Church and various Western Union trade unions, such as the AFL-CIO, provided funds, equipments, and also advices for the Solidarity Underground. The political alliance of Reagan and the Pope would prove important future of Solidarity. The Polish public also supported that it was left of Solidarity. The major medium for demonstrating support of Solidarity became masses held by priests such as Jerzy Popilusko. And besides the communist authorities, Solidarity was opposed by some of the Polish radical rights, believing Solidarity or KOR to be disguised communist group dominated by the Jewish Trotskyite Zionists. And by July 1983, the martial law was formally lifted. Though many heightened controls on civil liberties and political life, as well as food rationing, remained in place through the mid to the late 1980s. And just like from what Johnny stated, I wanted to say that the the Walesa also continued to insist that those papers are forgery. The documents included a note that is allegedly signed by Walesa, but it was never truly confirmed that the signature were Walesa's or not. There were also no evidence that Walesa was acting as an agent of the communist state, which leads to the only confirmed that Walesa was under pressure by police threats and blackmails. To, well, continue my from my previous reason on the support, obviously, there are things that kind of attach to it. So, probably starting off with from the death of the priest Jersey, there's actually like a huge wave of protest that sparks the thing, like, well, because of the death of the priest, anyways. And to follow up with that, with another, Poland actually had particularly free elections. Wow, it's like, and from this, they put a candidate to get elected. The person they put in charge is called Tadeusz Mazowiecki, and that They actually won 99 out of 100 seats in 3 elections. Three. And from this, they get the first ever non-communist leader in a Polish prime minister. Polish. Apologies. Oh God. And and from that on, they didn't have another communist leader again, which honestly is really a surprise based on the history and everything. And the Polish Pope also literally helped by standing up to the communist rule, which includes America that also helped send economic help. Also, to continue from the previous one, I also would like to add that the movement got a major morale boost. In November 1988, when Zelensky hosted the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, a fierce anti-communist. Thatcher lashed out at Jaruzelski at the state of banquet, saying Poland's depressed economy would improve only after freedom and liberty were restored. Well, and which also leads that she also visited outlaw Solidarity's leader in Gdańsk, telling almost 5,000 workers, nothing can stop you. Hashtag apostrophe. At and basically at dinner with the union leader, Britain's Iron Lady, that's what I call it, urged them to forge a practical plan to freedom.
So the topic of support is very interesting. Since we see that countries that have tried to stick up for themselves, such as Hungary and Czechoslovakia, did not receive the same immense amount of support that Poland did. So yeah, I think the support is a really big reason why um, Poland was sort of able to combat communism. But I think one last reason was that I think the Soviets got ahead of themselves and they were really, really confident that they could just wipe out Poland no problem. And they were sort of unprepared, I'd say, because when they invaded Hungary and Czechoslovakia, when they tried and revolt, they were able to do it with so much ease because of factors such as the lack of support and so on. So, how I would like to ask you guys, how much of a factor do you think the Soviet Union past experiences with attacking revolting countries affected this time around?
In Poland, well, I wanted from the previous ones, I just wanted to continue stating that in Poland, with the communist regime had been compromising with public opinions, also failing to crush the descendant movement, which is called the Solidarity, which obviously, and the government tried to absorb Solidarity into legitimate part of national affairs. The leaders of Solidarity agreed to cooperate with the communist regime, and the regime allowed Solidarity to run candidates into coming into elections. Wow. Some descendants also thinking that an absolute opposed to collaboration with the communists. They wanted to boycott the elections on the grounds and the elections were not entirely free. But Solidarity argued for participation in that the Poles Solidarity won an overwhelming victory, becoming the first ever freely elected opposition party in the country with a communist regime.
So now I'm saying that the response from the Soviets in Poland was better than the response in the other two situations, the Prague Spring and the Hungarian uprising. It was better because the Soviets they learned their lesson, and in Poland they didn't invade because if they did invade, they were afraid the same thing might happen in Hungary, as they might they might be afraid that Poland would be the same thing as Hungary. It would make them look bad if they did invade. If they did it too, if the invasion was not harsh enough, it would be like Czechoslovakia. It'd be like nothing. So instead, they just decided to leave it alone, and it turned out pretty well because the solidarity in Poland they were happy, and communists they were kind of also happy. They just implemented the martial law, and from that, it kind of slowed down the solidarity, which is a win-win for both sides. Also, the response day, instead of it was better because instead of kicking out the common, kicking out the Lech Walesa like they did in the other two countries, they just decide to wait for it to keep going, and then after that they put in Jaruzelski, and they made Jaruzelski implement the martial law on his own instead of them going in there to intervene and kicking Walesa out of office. So instead, the martial law got implemented, and Walesa got put into jail, and the this really slowed down solidarity, and their response was definitely better in Poland than in the other two countries.
Ah, that was a short one, but so in summary, you guys are basically saying that out of all the factors that led to the downfall of communism in Eastern Europe, you guys are saying Johnny was trying to say that Poland was not the one, but I think I lean more towards Vichika's point. I mean Alvina's points. Yeah, I lean more towards Alvina's points because it seemed like though it was more of a collective effort to bring down communism in Eastern Europe, but I think um, Alvina was right in saying that Poland had the most reasons and the most effect on why communism in Eastern Europe fell because of solidarity movement, which is one of the first if not successful movement of rebellion against communism. And then they had support, international support from important political figures all around the world, which other nations never were able to receive. And furthermore, the experience that the Soviet Union had seemed to be giving them too much confidence that they weren't able to execute in Poland like they were able to in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. So I think another reason why Poland seemed to be the most significant reason was after the events that happened, solidarity, getting the support, and after the Soviet were not able to fully execute their control of Poland, they were able to have parliament elections. Soviet troops started to leave Poland. They joined NATO even for peace programs, and much more freedom and democracy, which really started a domino effect, and it started to break down the Warsaw Pact one nation at a time, and eventually Eastern Europe was able to be freed of communism under the Soviet Union. Well, fellow historians, that's a wrap from us over at History with Larocco. I'm Muti signing out, and once again, a big special thank you to our esteemed guest Johnny
Yeah, still here.
and Alvina, which she has unfortunately left due to personal reasons. Please like and subscribe and peace out. Oops.